In 1918, one of America's most protected homes burned to the ground. Its owner was the world's greatest insurance magnate, a man who insured the entire Rockefeller empire against catastrophe. But he couldn't save his own castle from the fire. The losses exceeded $1 million. It wasn't destroyed by the flames of enemies. It was destroyed by a spark of progress. Faulty electrical wiring. This castle was built with the money of the most hated corporation in history, Standard Oil. But here's something you definitely don't know. The man who built this house wasn't just a rich man. He was the architect of modern offshore schemes. He was the first to move corporate money to Bermuda. I'll tell you how his personal catastrophe is connected to the financial system we use today, and why, to save his greatest creation, he first had to completely destroy it for a second time. This is one of the most serene places in America, a nature sanctuary gifted to the state of New York. Here, on impeccably manicured lawns, families stroll. In the shade of ancient trees, couples in love take photos against a backdrop of blooming rhododendrons. It seems this idyllic landscape has always existed, as if it were part of the natural order of things. But every paradise has its price, and this one was built with the money of the most hated corporation in the country's history. Every petal, every leaf in this garden was paid for with capital squeezed from the oil wells and steel rails of an empire whose name was synonymous with ruthless power, Standard Oil. Its creator was a man obsessed with a paradox, a man who wanted to recreate a past he never had. The smoking chimneys of steel mills, the stern, soot-stained faces of oil workers, newspaper headlines screaming of collusion, of crushed competitors, of an entire nation held hostage by a handful of industrialists. This was the reality of the Gilded Age, and above it all stood Coe Hall, majestic and cold. Its stone facade does not invite, it proclaims. Its spires don't reach for the sky, they pierce it. This is not just a house, it is a fortress built against the New World. A fortress erected by an English immigrant on land he could never quite call his own. How did a man who arrived in America with $20 in his pocket manage to erect an English castle on American soil? And why did this grandiose creation, this monument to absolute power and unbending will, only survive when its creator found the strength to let it go? In the pantheon of the Gilded Age, there are names carved in steel and stone: Rockefeller, Morgan, Carnegie. Their faces stared from magazine covers, their empires changed the nation's landscape. But behind every titan stands a shadow that manages what the titans themselves fear most: risk. William Robertson Coe was such a shadow. He didn't drill for oil or smelt steel. He was the empire's insurer. His firm, Johnson & Higgins, was a quiet but all-powerful monopolist. It became the financial nerve center through which all the fears of American industry passed. Every tanker laden with Standard Oil's crude, every ship carrying steel beams for J.P. Morgan's empire, every transatlantic liner, they all sailed under the invisible protection of William Coe. He didn't just sell policies, he dictated terms, creating complex financial instruments that made the giants dependent on his genius. But personal genius is only one part of the equation. The other, decisive part, came in the year 1900. That year, William Coe made the most profitable deal of his life. He married Mai Rogers. It was not just a marriage, it was a merger. Mai was the daughter of Henry Huddleston Rogers, the man known as John D. Rockefeller's brains and brawn. If Rockefeller was the cold strategist, Rogers was his battering ram, brutal and efficient. He was the architect of the monopoly, the man who personally crushed competitors, forcing them to sell their companies for a pittance or watch their businesses burn to the ground. Every dollar my Rogers inherited, a fortune of $30 to $40 million, was steeped in the smell of crude oil and coal dust. This was money earned by controlling the nation's arteries. And now, it merged with the capital of William Coe. Thus, the financial foundation of Coe Hall was born. Every stone in its future walls was a share of Standard Oil. Every carved panel was a share of the profits from hundreds of crushed small companies. This was the alchemy of the Gilded Age, transforming industrial brutality into aristocratic grace. Coe was not just the son-in-law of an oil baron. He was an active player in the game. He was the first to devise moving corporate insurance funds to Bermuda, creating complex offshore schemes to avoid taxes. He saw the world as a system of risks that could be calculated, packaged, and sold for a profit. The money was there. Now it needed a voice. And that voice had to speak with a flawless English accent. On the Gold Coast of Long Island, money screamed. It screamed from the turrets of French chateaux, from the marble columns of Italian palazzos, from giant lawns designed to humiliate the neighbors. It was an arena for America's nouveau riche, a battle of egos carved in stone. But William Robertson Coe, an immigrant from the English countryside, despised this noise. He considered it vulgar. He didn't want his money to scream. He wanted it to speak. With the cold, centuries-old confidence of an English aristocrat, the capital, born in the smoke and chaos of American industry, had to be purified. Every dollar earned from the Standard Oil monopoly now had to buy him what money, supposedly, cannot buy: a pedigree. His choice was not aesthetic. It was ideological, Tudor revival style. For Coe, this was a weapon. In a world where his millionaire neighbors built fantasies of European luxury, he decided to import authenticity, or, at the very least, a flawless imitation of it. His house was not to be an American mansion. It was to be a fragment of England, torn from time and transplanted onto hostile soil. For this mission, he hired not just architects, but arbiters of taste: Walker and Gillette. This firm built for old money, for families whose names were synonymous with power long before Rockefeller drilled his first well. By hiring them, Coe wasn't just buying a design, he was buying legitimacy. He was sending a signal: I am one of you, even if you don't accept me. Then, the land. 409 acres on the most prestigious coast in America. It wasn't a purchase. It was an invasion. He wasn't just building a house. He was establishing an estate, laying the foundation for a dynasty. On this land, his English castle was to take root, to become more real than the England he had left behind. From the very beginning, Coe Hall was not conceived as a place to live. It was conceived as a statement, a stone manifesto, denying his immigrant origins, his upstart status. It was a declaration to the world: I have not come to you, I have come home, even if this home never existed. He bought the land. He hired the best architects. He chose a style that was to become his eternal coat of arms. The dream was drawn on paper. Now, all that was left was to bring it to life in stone. And he did not yet know how fragile this dream would turn out to be. From the noise and soot of American industry, silence was born. On the purchased land, still smelling of wild grasses, the dream began to take on flesh. The first Coe Hall rose from the ground, not as a building, but as a living organism, growing a skin of stone and bones of wood. In rare, faded photographs, we see its birth. An army of workers, scaffolding enveloping the walls, blueprints spread across makeshift tables. Every hammer strike was paid for with Standard Oil dividends. Every beam imported from England, was bought with the proceeds from insuring steel empires. It was an architectural prayer, spoken in the language of capital. And at the center of this creation, there was not one will, but two. If William was building a fortress, my Robertson Coe was creating its soul. She was not just a millionaire's wife. She was a full partner in this grand project. Her canvas was the acres of land around the house. While William approved designs for fireplaces and stained glass windows, Mai planted the first trees, laid out the pathways, and chose the locations for future gardens. She didn't see just a plot of land. She saw a landscape that would mature over decades. It was their Eden, torn from the pages of English novels and planted on the coast of Long Island. The idyll seemed perfect. A family, a growing home that promised to become an eternal ancestral nest. The American rags to riches myth had reached its apex. An immigrant with $20 in his pocket now stood on the threshold of his own English castle, watching his children play on the lawn. He had done it. He had proven to everyone, and above all to himself, that he could not only make money, but also transform it into something eternal, noble. The first castle was completed. It was beautiful. It was a symbol of absolute triumph. It was proof that one could build a fortress against chaos, against time, against one's own past. But at the heart of this man-made eternity, within its walls, pulsed the most modern nerve of the era, electricity. They built a castle to protect themselves from the outside world. They had no idea that the most destructive force was already locked inside. 1918. The manor, which had stood for only 2 years, slept under the cold winter sky. Inside, in the silence of its halls, hung priceless tapestries and stood furniture brought from European estates. The house breathed history, bought perhaps, but now its own. And deep within the walls, hidden from view, a spark smoldered, the spark of progress. The fire started at night, not from a lightning strike, not by an arsonist's hand. Its cause was faulty electrical wiring. The most modern element of the house, the symbol of luxury and convenience, became its executioner. The flame, born within, began to devour the dream from the inside. It crawled up the walls, licked the oak panels, and turned fabrics that had survived centuries into ash. By morning, all that remained of the first Coe Hall was a blackened skeleton. The smoke rising from the ruins was visible for miles. It looked like a giant question mark hanging over the Gold Coast. The financial blow was staggering. Losses exceeded $1 million. But for William Coe, it was worse than just losing money. It was a humiliation, a cosmic, mocking irony. The greatest insurer in America, a man whose empire was built on foreseeing and managing disasters, was underinsured. He, who insured Rockefeller's fleets against the fury of the ocean, couldn't insure his own home against a spark in the wall. This was not just a financial miscalculation. It was a personal, existential failure. It was as if fate itself was laughing at his profession, at the very essence of his genius. He had built a fortress to prove his power over the world, and the world burned it to the ground, using his own technology to do it. The dream that cost a fortune, the dream that was supposed to outlast generations, had turned to ash in a single night. Now he had nothing but scorched earth and a sense of total defeat. Anyone else in his place would have been broken. Anyone else would have seen it as a sign not to challenge the gods. But William Coe was not just anyone. For him, this wasn't the end. It was a challenge. In the ashes of his dream, William Coe didn't see a tragedy. He saw a miscalculation. Fire was not an act of fate, Fire was a technical problem that needed to be solved, and he would solve it, once and for all. His reaction was immediate and absolute. No hesitation, no sentimentality. He gave the order, rebuild, immediately. But this time, everything would be different. He wouldn't rebuild a house. He would erect a fortress. The second Coe Hall was born not of a dream, but of fury, of a stubborn, cold desire to prove that his will was stronger than the elements. If wood burns, he would build with stone. If stone can crack, he would reinforce it with steel. This was no longer just construction. This was war. A war against fire, against chance, against the very idea of fragility. The foundation of the new house was laid not only with tons of concrete, but with a challenge thrown at fate itself. The structure was steel. The walls, massive limestone. The floors, reinforced concrete. Coe Hall No. 2 was designed as a fireproof safe, a bunker disguised as an English estate. It was meant to be eternal. Thousands of tons of limestone, quarried in Indiana, flowed to Long Island. An army of stonemasons, carpenters, and engineers converged once more on the scorched earth. The scale of the work was staggering. If the first house was an elegy, the second became an anthem, heavy, formidable, indestructible. Every block of stone set in place was an act of defiance. Every steel beam fitted into the frame was a vow that this would never happen again. It was an obsession. For Coe, the construction became a personal crusade. He was no longer creating a cozy family nest. He was erecting a monument to his own stubbornness. A monument that was meant to stand forever, as a silent reproach to all the forces of chaos that had dared to encroach upon his world. The walls grew, invulnerable and proud. He was building the ultimate defense against external threats, but he failed to consider that the most terrifying threat, the one from which neither steel nor concrete can save you, would not come from the outside. It was already within. The walls grew, indestructible, fireproof, eternal. They were William Coe's answer to chaos, his steel fist raised against fate. But while he was winning the war with fire, he was losing another, far more important battle, with time. In 1924, when the house was nearly finished, when triumph was so close, a catastrophe occurred from which steel beams offer no protection. Mai died. His wife, the woman whose money and whose taste were the soul of this project, the woman who planted the first trees in the garden, preordaining their beauty for decades to come, the woman for whom, ultimately, this castle was being built. She would never see it completed. She would never walk through its echoing halls, never touch the cold stone walls, never see the sun play in the stained glass windows they had chosen together. With her death, the construction lost its meaning. The joy of creation was replaced by the inertia of duty. But the work didn't stop. The machine had been set in motion. The masons continued to hew stone, the carpenters to cut oak. But now, every strike of their hammers echoed in the emptiness. The house, intended as a temple to family life, was becoming a mausoleum for their shared dream. And fate wasn't finished dealing its blows. Just 1 year later, in 1925, with the walls already under the roof, his eldest son, Robert, was killed. A car crash. Another breach in the dynasty for which this fortress was built. Now, Coe Hall was being built on a foundation of grief. Its luxurious facades, its flawless masonry, its roof that defied the heavens, all of it became just an expensive, exquisite shell for pain and loss. He had defeated the fire, but the price of that victory was unbearable. He had built the perfect defense, but he was now defending an empty throne. The castle was almost finished. It was magnificent. It was indestructible. And it was dead before it was ever born. We talk about the will of one man, about his money, about his tragedy. But who actually built this castle? Whose hands turned blueprints into stone and sketches into oak panels that seem older than America itself? It was an entire army. An army of craftsmen, ghost-like creators whose names are not carved on the facade. Immigrants from Italy and Ireland who came to the New World in search of work and found it building the fantasy of another immigrant. Stonemasons from Indiana, whose families had worked in the limestone quarries for generations. They came to Long Island to create the illusion of centuries-old English antiquity with their calloused hands. For them, it was just a job. Hard, daily, honest work. And for the finest details, Coe brought specialists directly from England. The best woodcarvers, whose ancestors may have worked on real Tudor castles, crossed the Atlantic. For years, they lived here, in the shadow of the growing giant, and painstakingly, inch by inch, carved the most intricate patterns from oak and walnut. Their chisels sang a song of the old world, while outside the walls, the new 20th century roared. In the letters they sent home, in the memories of their descendants, we see a striking contrast. They describe their modest lives in workers' barracks, their simple meals, their homesickness, and then the details of their work, creating a ceiling that cost more than their entire home village, carving a fireplace that would warm people whose faces they would never see. Their hands knew how to make fresh stone look as if it were weathered by centuries. How to give new oak the patina of time. They were alchemists, turning money into history. While William Coe was in his New York office ensuring empires and counting profits, here, on his land, these nameless masters were creating the physical reality of his ambition. Every curl on a wooden panel, every perfectly fitted stone in the wall, is not just a detail. It represents hours of a human life. It is the sweat, the skill, and the quiet pride of a man who creates incredible luxury with his own hands, knowing he would never be a part of it. They built him a castle, and then they gathered their tools and dissolved into history, leaving behind only the perfection of their work. William Coe understood a cruel truth. One must be born an aristocrat. But he was a child of the Gilded Age, an era that believed if something couldn't be inherited, it could be bought. And so he decided to buy aristocracy, not a title, but its physical remains, piece by piece. Coe Hall is not just a building in the English style, it's a hybrid, a monster stitched together from fragments of authentic European history, which Coe, like a surgeon, carved out of a dying old world and transplanted onto his American soil. This chapter is a detective investigation. We follow Coe's agents as they scour post-war Europe, buying up artifacts. They aren't hunting for paintings or sculptures. They're hunting for architecture itself. Here they are, the famous Carshalton Gates, 18th century, a masterpiece of English blacksmiths. Once, they guarded the peace of a British estate. Now, they creak in the Long Island wind, greeting automobiles instead of carriages. Every scroll of its ironwork was paid for with American oil. And inside the house, the transplantation of the past reaches its apogee. The stained glass windows in the dining room, their blue and red panes seem unusually deep, because these are authentic windows from the 15th and 16th centuries. Coe bought them from ruined European churches and castles. He embedded other people's prayers and other people's coats of arms into the walls of his home. The fireplace in the Great Hall is not a copy. It's a replica, but executed with such precision that the line blurs. Coe's agents gained access to a real English castle, made casts and sketches, and artisans recreated it in America. The ceiling in the gallery is an exact copy of the ceiling in Grantham House. He didn't create the new. He appropriated the old. This wasn't mere decoration. It was a desperate attempt to inject the blue blood of history into the veins of his creation. If you don't have ancestors who lived in castles, buy the fireplace from their castle. If your family didn't pray in ancient chapels, install their windows in your dining room. Coe was literally trying to embed someone else's memory into concrete and steel. Every such artifact is a scar on the body of Europe and a trophy in the collection of an American magnate. Coe Hall is not a home. It's a collection of architectural quotations assembled into a single, grandiose, but profoundly artificial whole. He built himself a past he never had, from the fragments of other people's real pasts. Parallel to the construction of his stone fortress, another invisible war was being waged, a war for land. But not for the acres of Long Island, but for the very flora of the planet. For William Coe, botany was not a peaceful hobby. It was a battlefield, a continuation of his business by other means. His obsession with plants was as great as his architectural ambitions. He didn't just want a beautiful garden. He wanted to assemble the greatest collection of rare species in the world, a living library of plants that would surpass the gardens of European monarchs. Every sapling in this garden is a stock, purchased on the edge of risk. Coe financed perilous expeditions to the most remote corners of the world. While he sat in his Wall Street office, his plant hunters were scaling the slopes of the Himalayas, trekking through impassable gorges in China, risking their lives for the seeds of the rarest rhododendrons and azaleas. This was a form of colonialism, botanical imperialism. These men, hired with Coe's money, weren't just scientists. They were conquerors. They invaded fragile ecosystems to rip living treasures from them for one millionaire's garden. In their journals, we read of disease, of encounters with hostile tribes, of the risk of falling into an abyss, all for a flower that was meant to adorn a lawn thousands of miles away. The garden we see today is not just a collection of beautiful plants. It's a map of William Coe's conquests. Every exotic shrub is a trophy brought back from a distant expedition. Every alley is a meticulously planned military campaign. He managed his garden the same way he managed his insurance empire, with absolute control, strategic planning, and a willingness to pay any price for a unique asset. 17 greenhouses operated year-round, like factory workshops, creating perfect conditions for their temperamental newcomers. The garden became as much a symbol of power and global reach as the house itself. If Coe Hall was his fortress, then the planting fields became his personal, living empire, where the sun never set on his botanical dominions. The castle is complete. The gardens are in bloom. The dream has taken its indestructible form. But a home is not just walls, it's people. And the world outside the Carshalton gates began to come apart at the seams. The Great Depression arrived. The empires of Wall Street collapsed. Millionaires threw themselves from windows. An entire nation plunged into poverty. But inside Coe Hall, time had stopped. Here, on 409 acres, the economic laws of America did not apply. William Coe made a decision that seemed like madness. He refused to lay off his staff. More than 100 people, gardeners, servants, chauffeurs, cooks, maids, continued to receive their wages as if nothing had happened. His estate became an autonomous feudal state, a tiny island of prosperity in an ocean of despair. To the outside world, it was an act of incredible nobility, an example of paternalistic care for his people. But within its walls, this generosity came at a different price. For William Coe's children, for his heirs, the house ceased to be a home. It became a museum, frozen in time, heavy as a tombstone. Every morning, they woke up within walls that were a monument to their father's ambition and a tombstone for their mother. They lived surrounded by ghosts, the ghosts of a past their father had so desperately tried to buy, and the ghosts of a future he had already planned for them. Dynasty. That word hung in the air of every hall, in every fold of the velvet curtains. But the children did not share his obsession. For them, it wasn't a fortress, but a gilded cage. Perfect, luxurious, but a cage nonetheless. They saw the world beyond the gates, a world that was changing, living, breathing, and their world was preserved by the will of one man. They were expected to become the guardians of this mausoleum. But how can you live in a museum? How can you breathe in a hermetically sealed time capsule while history rushes past? Coe kept his small world intact, but in the process, he may have lost those for whom this world was intended. He built the perfect family nest, but his fledglings wanted to fly. His zenith had arrived. William Robertson Coe had reached the point where power becomes almost absolute. He was the master of his own universe, and this universe extended far beyond the borders of his estate. From his high-rise office on Wall Street, he controlled the sea. His insurance empire, Johnson & Higgins, held the fate of global shipping in its hands. But he also controlled the land. As chairman of the board of the Virginian Railway, built by his father-in-law, he commanded the steel arteries through which flowed the coal that fed the industry of the East Coast. Every whistle of a locomotive, every creak of a ship's hull in port, it was all the music of his power. And his estate, Coe Hall, was the physical embodiment of this power. It was not just a dwelling, but a command center, an autonomous state with its own power plant, capable of lighting a small city and its own water supply system. The house's telephone system had 40 lines, more than many corporations. From his library, he could contact any point on the globe, give an order, close a deal. Here, in his English castle, he received those who ruled the world. President Theodore Roosevelt was his guest. Members of the British royal family, including the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, sought an audience with him. To them, he was not just a rich man, he was an equal, a man who, by sheer force of will, had created an aristocracy where none had existed before. But the true heart of his American empire beat in one, most unusual room of the house, the Buffalo Room. Here, amidst the heads of bison and Native American artifacts collected from his ranch in Wyoming, the English lord met the American magnate. It was the only reminder, the only concession to the fact that this entire Tudor fantasy stood on American soil. It was here, in this room, that he conducted his business. This was his Oval Office. He had reached the summit. He had built an indestructible home. He had amassed a fortune that seemed eternal. He received kings. He was the master of the universe. But every universe has its limits, and the world beyond his gates was already beginning to change according to laws that were beyond even his control. What was real life like in this palace? Behind the stone facades and immaculate lawns hid a world of contrasts, a world of splendor and emptiness. Rare home video footage shows us only the facade of this life. Lavish balls attended by all of New York's high society. Women in furs and diamonds, men in tailcoats. An orchestra plays in the great hall. The sounds of a custom-made organ fill the space. Champagne flows like water. Prohibition, which shackled the rest of America, didn't exist here. Laws were for common people, not for the elite of the Gold Coast. Coe Hall's vast wine cellar was safely protected from federal agents by the thickness of its stone walls and the thickness of its owner's wallet. But when the guests departed and the music faded, the house sank into a different reality, into a hollow, melancholic silence that had settled here after Mai's death. The house, built for a family, became too large, too majestic, too empty. It was a stage on which the drama of a rich but unhappy family was played out. Beneath the surface of this luxury, another world existed, invisible and strictly hierarchical. The world of the servants. Dozens of people lived and worked in separate wings and on the upper floors, following unwritten laws as complex as those of any English estate from Downton Abbey. There were their own territories, their own rules, their own pride. The butler, the housekeeper, the cooks, the footmen, the maids, everyone knew their place. Their lives were dedicated to maintaining the illusion of an aristocratic existence for a family that was itself merely an imitation of aristocracy. Every day was a ritual. William Coe, the patriarch, would personally tour his 17 greenhouses each morning, checking on his living treasures before heading off to shape the destinies of industry in New York. The children lived in the shadow of his gigantic ambitions, under the pressure to conform to his vision of a dynasty. Coe Hall was the perfect stage, but the play performed on it was one of loss, loneliness, and unspoken expectations. Behind the walls of this golden cage, everyone played their part, but no applause could be heard. The 40s arrive. William Coe is old. The world he knew, the world he had conquered, is dying. The era of the Gold Coast is in its death throes. He looks out the windows of his castle and sees bulldozers, like predators, tearing into the neighboring estates. The castles and palazzos built by his rivals are crumbling, giving way to suburban homes for a new generation of Americans. Their upkeep has become an unbearable burden, their style a ridiculous anachronism. He looks at his children. His dream of a dynasty, of generations of Coes walking these halls, has failed. They do not share his passion, his obsession. For them, this house is a giant stone burden, a legacy they neither want nor are able to carry. He understands. After his death, Coe Hall will meet the same fate. His fortress, his challenge to destiny, will be sold, divided, demolished. His name will be wiped off the map. At this moment, William Coe, the great insurer, faces the greatest risk of his life, the risk of oblivion. And he faces a choice. Allow his greatest creation to turn to dust, clinging to an unfulfilled dream of a dynasty, or to do the unthinkable, to act against his every instinct as a property owner. In 1949, 6 years before his death, he makes a decision that determines the fate of the house and rewrites the meaning of his entire life. He gives it all away. The house, the gardens, all 409 acres. He transfers his kingdom to the state of New York. It was a stroke of genius, an act of self-preservation disguised as philanthropy. He understood that the only way to save his creation was to strip it of its status as private property. The only way to make it live forever was to give it to the people. He sacrificed his most cherished dream, the dream of a family living within these walls, to save another, stone dream. He severed his name from the right of ownership to forever inscribe it in the history of this place. This was his final, largest, and wisest insurance policy, and it insured his legacy against the greatest catastrophe of all, time. Why did Coe Hall survive when dozens of other Gold Coast palaces turned to ruins? The answer is paradoxical. It survived not because of its creator's obsessive control, but because of his timely renunciation. It was preserved because its owner understood that to hold on to something forever, you have to let it go. Today, we are here again, at the Planting Fields Arboretum. William Coe's business empire, his insurance firm Johnson & Higgins, has long been absorbed by competitors and dissolved into the annals of corporate history. His vast fortune has been scattered among his heirs. His name is all but forgotten by the world of big money. But here, in his gardens, his legacy is more alive than ever. The rhododendrons brought back by his expeditions from the Himalayas bloom every spring. The trees planted by his wife, Mai, cast shadows on lawns where thousands of people now walk. His true passion, not stone, but plants, outlived him, his era, and his ambitions. And the house, built as a monument to elitism, as a fortress separating one man from the rest of the world, has become the people's property. Its halls, which once heard only the quiet footsteps of servants and the laughter of select guests, are now filled with the voices of school tours. The fortress became a museum. The golden cage opened its doors. Herein lies the final, most important paradox. William Robertson Coe, a man who spent his life insuring others against disasters, found the only way to ensure his own legacy against oblivion was by giving it away. He couldn't buy himself an aristocratic past. His English castle brought him no comfort and created no dynasty, but he gave his plants immortality, and in an act of supreme generosity, or supreme pragmatism, he ensured eternal life for his stone heart, allowing it to beat for everyone. He lost the battle for control, but won the war for immortality. And so ends the story of a castle born of oil and steel, and of a man who tried to build himself a past. His greatest creation, this impenetrable fortress of ego, survived not because of its creator's willpower, but in spite of it, only when he found the wisdom to let go of what he had so desperately tried to hold on to. In the end, what proves to be stronger? The stone walls that protect one family's dream, or an idea given to millions? And what are we building in our own lives? A fortress or a bridge? The answer to this question is different for everyone, and we would be incredibly interested to read your thoughts in the comments. If this story made you think, please support our channel. Your subscription and like are the best way to help us continue telling the stories of what hides behind the facades of great ambitions.